Man, that super finale was crazy! I cannot believe we are jumping straight into another Dragon Ball series just 1 week later. You'd think there'd be like 6 or 7 years between series or something, maybe some movies in the middle. Anyway, we're coming to the end of 2018. Wait, what do you mean it's 2024? What the fuck? It is so good to be back, and thank you so much for sticking around through all of these years. What a joy to return with a Dragon Ball series that has one of the best production schedules around. From episode 1 alone, it is clear we're in for a real visual treat. This is truly the antithesis of Dragon Ball Super's production, and I can tell you that that is no coincidence. This is a series that began with the acknowledgement of Super's failings, one that was aware of all the memes and bad reputation that the series' visuals had, and put itself in a position to ensure that not only would that never happen again, but it would exceed the average quality of a TV anime. We're talking years of production. This series began all the way back in 2021. It was originally a side story away from Toriyama's mainline work, but as he gave advice here and there, he eventually got more and more involved until it hit the point where he was doing not just the whole story, but character designs, world design, vehicles, you name it, he had a hand in it. He was very much a key part in shaping this series' visuals. Now, Toei actually created a pilot for this show in the first half of 2022, which you can actually see in the first trailer we got just a year later in 2023. There are many scenes there that never and probably will never make their way into real episodes. It was produced as a proof of concept for Shueisha and Toriyama to have a look at, and I think what came of it really speaks to Toriyama's involvement. For example, Goku's design is actually subtly different from the final product. You can see he has his old shoes, a rope for the Niobo sheath, and even facially it's a far cry from the final results. That's because this was character designer Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru's original design before Toriyama then came in and adjusted the long legs, changed up that rope for fabric, and many other subtle details that actually amount to quite a significant overhaul of that original design. You'll also notice that that yellow gi was changed to orange for the final episodes, which again is another of Toriyama's personal requests. As staff began to be hired soon after and production kicked into full gear in October of 2022, this hands-on approach never changed. Whether it be storyboards, character designs, layouts, this would all be looked over by Toriyama and Shueisha. We often hear the same old marketing spiel with every Dragon Ball property about how this is the most Toriyama has ever been involved. But in Daima's case, that has never been more true. It's great to hear, and it's also been a really fluid and relaxed production. Staff, of course, worked extremely hard on this series, but they also had the flexibility to go off and do other projects if boards were still being finalized, and they could then come back and still have stacks of time left to get their work done. As an extension of that, you may have heard that the series was originally called Dragon Ball Magic, and that is very true, right through to the end of the series. That's what it's been called internally. Of course, publicly, Toriyama changed it to be Dragon Ball Daima only a few days before its announcement, but it speaks to the fluidity of the project. Originally, this was conceived of as a web anime, a project made for streaming, like you may have seen with the Pluto anime on Netflix recently, but as the production grew, it was eventually brought over to TV, and that's why it's now in this newly created Friday premium late night time slot. But that's just a vague look at some of the pre-production. Let's take a look at who's actually heading up this show. We've actually got a bit of a weird non-standard credit at the top line here. Written in katakana, the English word series director is given to Ayaka Maki. Now, One Piece fans will know her for her excellent episodes over on that show, especially the musical sequences in the recent movie film Red. But what makes this credit interesting is that the role is typically written in kanji. It's the word kantoku, which in this context is also translated as series director. But that credit, however, belongs to Yoshitaka Yashima here, and I'm sure many longtime fans of this channel may well remember that he's an animator first and foremost. He was very famous on Dragon Ball Super for animating episodes entirely by himself, and okay, for some pretty questionable art, but we'll just ignore that for now. He did some okay storyboards on Super, but this is a huge jump for someone with zero directorial experience. But I think that explains the relationship here, and we can use a little bit of inside baseball to justify it. A more common credit that you typically see is Chief Series Director, and then Regular Series Director under that, where the division of duties is split depending on strength, but ultimately the final say will always be with that Chief Director. In Daima's case, I suspect the credit is listed like this because it's much more of a joint partnership than a hierarchical one. direction. It's one where Yoshima gets to use his animation strengths for storyboarding and correcting other people's boards. He gets to create useful assets to help animators understand settings far better, and generally he was known within the staff room to have communicated Toriyama's ideas really well. In contrast, Komaki's strengths are in visual direction, so overseeing directorial decisions like lighting design, special color work and whatnot will be where her strengths are best used. And ultimately that's what we see here in episode 1, with Komaki taking on the role of director and Yashima handling the storyboard. So without further ado, let's dive in and we can touch on the rest of the staff along the way. Heading up the Daima animation director role, or Dad, as I'm calling them from now on, is none other than Takeo Ide, a long-time Dragon Ball veteran stretching right back to the early days of the series, onwards through into Super and now Daima, and someone who I should have made a video on many years ago, but I won't. While he was very visible on those series, the landscape of anime sure has changed in recent years, to the point that an animation director role doesn't really mean your art style is going to be all that visible on screen anymore. That is quite the change from Super, where things were changing every single episode. The reason is that chief animation directors have taken a central role in an era where episodes typically have a whole bunch of ADs, and so a singular person needs to sit at the top of that hierarchy to bring all their styles in line to ensure visuals aren't changing from segment to segment. And while Daima doesn't have a bunch of animation directors on this episode, in fact Ide is the only one here outside of some of the assistants that I'll touch on later, it's still a very important role on Daima to unify the look and quality of the series from episode to episode. Introducing Chikashi Kubota, a man who really needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. You will know his scenes from his fantastic work on Dragon Ball Super Broly, his phenomenal 2D intro for Superhero, and here he is as the chief AD, dropping the most insane art you've ever seen from start to finish. This episode is his baby and it is fucking incredible. He has very famously said that he would love to remake Dragon Ball, and it is so hilarious to me that his past 2 appearances on Dragon Ball have been him doing exactly that. He kicks off this episode in full force with his own key animation, and I really love the difference in timing between how he animates adult Goku versus Kid Goku here. The adult cut is so robust and snappy, while Kid Goku has this really fun, fluid energy to him, and I don't think you could look for a better example of how timing and spacing can affect the impression of your animation. And well, somewhat amusingly, Tadayoshi Yamamuro himself was on this episode, and he's here assisting with finishing this particular cut. You'd never notice it in motion, but if you go frame by frame, it's very funny to see him pop up between frames with his classic style. While that's the majority of the meaningful motion from Kubota's personally animated segment, the stunning array of stills of Z's villains go a long way in illustrating the genius of Komaki's direction. She really is someone who just loves to bathe scenes in stunning color work, and that really comes across here in these stylized stills. Her ideas are so well executed thanks to the photography director Naoyuki Wada. Compositing is such an important and unappreciated part of the anime production process. It's what takes those aliased individual frames and creates the full breadth of a scene. So that includes things like the line filter, the lighting such as the bloom found across this episode, and even smaller aspects like gradients and all the meaningful details that help to add depth and textural elements to a scene. I think most people became aware of him with Dragon Ball Super Broly and all the fancy work done there, even if they didn't know his name. And since then, he travelled across to One Piece to help overhaul the visuals there with Nagamine for the Wano arc onwards, and now he's back with Daima once again. A lot of people over the years have attributed that line work to Shintani, but hate to break it to you, that is a filter, and that is from the mind of Naoyuki Wada. But jumping back to Kubota, I think what's cool to see is that he really understands Dragon Ball stylistic quirks across all of its eras. These flashback sequences are chock full of his corrections that feel right out of Toriyama's manga, and yet at the same time, all of the present day content adheres so nicely to Nakatsuru's design work while still being recognizably him. The large round eyes, the smaller neck, the Nakatsuru style chest. He's an artist with a distinct look, but one that carefully weaves in the intended design work of a show with very little issue. The majority of the episode's action animation is found within these flashbacks. There's Yuya Takahashi, who seems to handle much of the Majin Vegeta fight, with a lot of his very fast and impactful pose-to-pose animation on full display. Some of the timing and artwork seems to be a little foreign for Takahashi in this scene, despite having his effects work, so I might have to check back in here in future after poking Star for a little more information just in case this guess is wrong, but either way, I mean, this is a fantastic scene. Vegeta's sacrifice itself might not be the most animated scene, but the story behind it is actually pretty cute. It's the work of an animator called Shun Sawai. He's still fairly fresh in his career, but he is a huge Dragon Ball fan. I mean, he literally has a Twitter account dedicated to fan art from the show, and earlier this year he even animated a Dragon Ball tribute in the anime Oblivion Battery. He was personally invited to this episode by Kubota, and I think it's really sweet to see shared fandom result in connections like that. Konosuke is back doing Shenlong's summoning. He's shown up in basically every Dragon Ball project for the past decade. You've got some of the greats from DBS Broly back, like Takumi Yamamoto, who animated Bardock's demise, or there's Osamu Takara, who served as sub-designer on that movie. There's so much going on here, and it's so crazy that there's even really cool scenes that are just background elements in conversations. Of course, the big action highlight is Goku versus Vegeta in the present day, but you may notice that it is different and also missing scenes from the trailer. Part of that is that there have simply been some retakes, and that's normal. There are some earlier in this episode too, in fact, but the missing stuff, well, that's because that was from the pilot. In the pilot, Yuya Takahashi animated, and you can see that yellow gi I mentioned that has of course been changed to orange for the final version. And that final take has primarily been animated by Toru Iwasawa, someone people may know from his various work on the different Fate series. What's nice about his inclusion here is that the Gallic Gun versus the Kamehameha moment was not in Yashima's original storyboard, but after communicating just how much he wanted to animate that, he was allowed to add that sequence to the episode. I'm telling you, this really is a celebratory episode made by fans. And it's not just the action where this episode excels either. Although we've yet to receive too much information on who was behind some of these scenes, there is a great deal of fantastic character animation found throughout this episode. All that crazy exposition with Gomar and Degasu and Arinsu, it almost never stops moving. It just does such a wonderful job of informing the audience of the characters' personalities beyond just the dialogue delivery. They are bouncing off the screen in the best kind of way. And I think what stood out to me is just how well a lot of this is framed. Like I mentioned, Yashima is the storyboard artist for this episode, and while his boards on Super were okay, it's great to see how far he's developed over the years, especially at his big age of 70. The blocking here is really competent. It's not necessarily relying on the wacky angles we see from more modern directors, but the layering of characters feels really carefully considered and nicely composed. Is it lighting the world on fire? No, but it's decent work, and I think that being the baseline in the series with a lot of interesting boards to come is absolutely fine. This is a nice foundation for an episode that barely scratched the surface of what this series has to offer. I've barely touched on Nakatsuru's design work, I've made no mention of the art director or assistant animation directors like Dragon Ball Super's Miyako Tsuji. The thing is, their presence will be significantly more prominent in future episodes, so I'm going to save a deep dive until then. Back in 2018 though, I said the following during a Broly review. Part of me kind of considered this kind of thing to be a bit of a dream, and I hope in a couple of years I can look back on this and go, wow, you were impressed by that? Look at where we are now. It's funny to look back on that, because of course Broly remains the pinnacle of Dragon Ball animation. We now have a new series with a dream production schedule, an array of talent on board that is indescribably passionate about Dragon Ball, and it's all come together for a series that not only celebrates this franchise's 40th anniversary, but is one of the final gifts Akira Toriyama left us. I am so excited for the future of Daima, and I look forward to sharing more information and analysing whatever magnificence hits us over the next however many weeks. Thank you so much for sticking around through all of these years. It is very rare that a YouTuber gets to vanish for effectively 6 or 7 years and come back to people who still care. If you continue to hit that like button, leave a comment and share on social media, that would be amazing. But for now, I will catch you in the next video.